This video is about regular expressions. These are used throughout RapidMiner, and a good knowledge is essential because it helps you make smaller, more robust processes, and generally you can get the best out of the product once you know about them. This video shows the main places where regular expressions are used, with some worked examples to illustrate. Regular expressions are daunting, but it's worth persevering because frankly you'll wonder how you manage without them. This video is not a tutorial on regular expressions because there are plenty of free resources on the internet that give you everything you could ever possibly want to know, and frankly more, about how they work. So we'll cover renaming attributes, and there's a dialog box that comes up to help with that, generating attributes, selecting attributes, again with another dialog box to help, and finally replacing attribute values. And these are the main things, really, the main places where regular expressions get used. So we have a process. So we have a process. This process makes some data in the normal way, doesn't matter how it does it. And the bottom branch here, this renames some attributes using various operators to do that. That's what this chain does. This is a generate attributes operator where a regular expression is being used to make some new attributes. This top row, this is select attributes. This is where a regular expression is used to select certain attributes. And this final one is a replace operator, again using regular expressions to change the values of attributes. So let's start by running it with a breakpoint on the data to have a look at the data. So the data, there are two example sets. There's this one here, 150 examples, 45 regular attributes. You can see it's based on the iris data set. And I've created some new attributes based on various permutations of additions, subtractions, multiplications and divisions. Hopefully these are all correct. So A1, A2, yep, 8.6. I've also created over here an attribute that is a nominal. Just examine it so you can see what's happening. Let's move it to there so it's more obvious. So this is a concatenation of the numerical values of A1 to A4 presented as a string. I mean, you probably never want to do this, but this is just going to help me illustrate something later on. The other example set is some nominal data just generated using the generate data operator. So let's go down the rename by replacing set of operators here. What this does, it lets you rename attributes, and it lets you do that using regular expressions. So let's set a breakpoint before and one after and have a look at the regular expression. What this is going to do is it's going to look for an open round bracket and replace it with a square bracket, an open square bracket. Let's just convince ourselves that will work. So every attribute that has an open round bracket in it will be changed so that the attribute name has a square bracket in it, and you can see here it's worked. Let's see how that actually does its job. So looking at the regular expression here, this is / escapes certain reserved characters. Open round bracket rather is a reserved character. So basically saying whenever there's an open round bracket, simply replace it with a square one. And in fact, you can bring up this dialog box and you can try things out. So if I put in here A1 plus A2, so this is the actual, that's the name of the attribute. If I do that, you can see it's essentially building for me the regular expression parameters to go into the rename by replacing operator. And you can see basically match me an open round bracket, and you can see the yellow highlighting there does it, and basically then it says okay, replace that with that replacement. If I were to put that in there, you could see that that causes the result preview to change, but I just want that. And you can see there are some other tabs here to give you more information about what's going on. So you can see it's matched an open round bracket. Also some options here, which I'm going to leave well alone, but you can study the internet to find out what they mean. So that's a very easy way to create your regular expression, which is quite nice. Let's continue on. Then the second one, I'm now going to replace the closing round bracket with a closing square bracket. Might as well just set a breakpoint there and run it to that point. And you can see now A1, A2, A1, A3, etc. All of the ones where there was a round bracket at the beginning and end have now been replaced with a square bracket. Now the reason, by the way, you would do this is if you want to manipulate these attributes in a generator attributes operator later on, you need to make sure that there are no reserved mathematical symbols in the attribute names, and round brackets, pluses, minuses and so on are actually reserved and will get interpreted wrongly. So this is actually one reason why you would use rename by replacing to pick out all of these mathematical symbols and change them. But anyway, as you can see, it's done the job. Now let's just do the pluses and the minuses. So if I go back to the chain of rename by replacings, I'm doing the same thing here, but this is a more complicated regular expression. This is much more complicated than you need, but I'm doing it this way to illustrate how to use capturing groups. So in this situation, I'll bring up the dialog box. Basically this is saying find me any character, then find me a plus, then find me any character. The brackets place anything that's found before the plus into a thing called a capturing group, and similarly here this is a capturing group as well. So if I now do this, if I do A1 plus A2, you can see it's matched it quite contentedly, and actually I can now do this. If I do $1, that's the code for the first capturing group, and as you can see over here, I know the answer already, but if I do plus $2, you can see that basically it's filled in the contents of everything before the plus as the result of this $1 operation, and then it's put that into the result here. Then plus is some text, and A2 is the expansion for the $2 capturing group, second one. Quite nice. Now it's overkill, but it doesn't let you do this sort of thing. If I change, you can do this. I mean, you wouldn't do this. This is wrong, obviously. But there might be situations where you might want to rearrange the names of attributes, and the way to do that is to use capturing groups to pick out parts of the name and then change the ordering. IP addresses is one, for example. Anyway, all very nice. Let's leave it for that, like that. So the result of running this will be that plus symbol will be replaced by plus. Let's just prove that. Sure enough, A1 plus A3 and so on. If we continue, I'm doing exactly the same thing here, but for the minus symbol, the multiplication symbol and the divide symbol, but that's just a single forward slash, quite an easy one. Let's just for instruction purposes, let's look at one more thing on the dialog box here. If you get stuck and don't know enough about regular expressions, you can click on that drop down and you can see here this is the list of commonly used regular expression constructs. So dot is with any character, which often confuses people. Open and close square brackets is a way of putting characters in there. Putting this caret sign at the top means, at the beginning rather, negates that. There's the capturing group, which we're using in this expression here. These are quantifiers to say how many times something should appear. So I'm using star, which is 0 or more. You can use question mark or plus, which means 0 or 1 for the question mark situation. Plus means 1 or more. You can also do more complicated things, like saying how many times you want something to appear. And anyway, you can obviously read these yourself, and you can become expert on regular expressions. But take it from me, there's a huge amount of power, and I've never found something I can't do. So it's all good stuff. Okay, let's go back to. So at the end of this, we've successfully renamed all of the attributes so that they don't have any reserved characters in them. So now, here they are, all the way over here, all sorts of weird and wonderful attributes. So I could be now confident that I could use these attributes in some sort of subsequent generate attributes operation. Okay, next let's look at generate attributes itself. So this is using regular expressions. A rather contrived example, but what I'm doing here is I'm using the finds function, which is available in generate attributes, and it takes two arguments. One is the attribute we want to find something in, and the second one is a regular expression. So what this is doing is it's basically saying if attribute A1 to A4, whatever that is, contains 3 and 5, then that whole expression is set to true, otherwise it's false. So what the irregular expression means is if there's a 3 and a 5 separated by 0 or more characters, then set this variable here, this attribute here, to true. This bottom one here, this essentially is a more complicated regular expression. It's basically searching for 7 occurrences of 0, the number 0. Anyway, let's run it, set a breakpoint and run it. So now, if I go to these attributes here, so now what's happening is, let me move these round so we can see them more easily at the front. Okay, a bit of moving around, here we go. So basically A1 to A4 matches that regex 3 something, 0 or more occurrences than a 5. So basically you can see here, yeah sure, this one is true, there is a 3 and a 5 separated by 1 character. This is an example where 3 and a 5 do not exist. So that's set to false. And we could go on like that. This attribute here, A1 to A4, matches 7 zeros. And if I scroll, there's one. There we go. So basically this is indeed saying there are not 7 zeros in this attribute's value. Therefore, this is false. Okay, very contrived, but it does show what you can do. Okay. Now let's move to the final two. This is selection of attributes and replacing of the values. So the data in this situation was some nominal data, and I'm going to set a breakpoint before and after this attribute selection. And I'm basically saying here, here's a regular expression where I'm going to say only give me attributes that match ATT and then anything, 0 or many of any character. And if we run the process, this is the before, at 1, at 2, at 3, at 4, and then the after. Sure enough, it's selected at 1, at 2, at 3, at 4, and so on. The special attribute label has been deselected because I set to true include special attributes. But let's look in detail how to build that. And this is a slightly different regular expression dialog box, and you can see it's quite nice. It actually shows you these are the attribute names, and you can, again in the same way, you can choose things from this helpful list here. So you could, for example, change this to at 1, and you can see in real time it matches that there. You can use a disjoint operator at 1 or at 4. Sure enough, there they appear. You could do at 1 to 3. Da, da, da. There's at 1 to 3. You could say at I want any character, but I don't want any number, so I shall do that. So that's basically saying match any character, and then if it's a number, exclude it, which means that only label makes it through in that situation. And you could, for example, have a t twice anything. That's what that's doing. And like I say, this is not a course on regular expressions. Use the internet for that, but you can basically do what you like and have pretty much what you really want in your regular expression, so you can select the attributes you're really interested in. So that's that one there. And then the final one is this replace operator. This is going to change the values inside attributes to something else based again on a regular expression. So what's happening here is I'm basically saying replace anything where value occurs followed by a number, and I'm putting the number, which is %/d rather. /d is a short code for number. That's in a capturing group. So what I want to do is I want to replace anything that's called value n, whatever n might be, with text number and the value of the capturing group, which is in this case whatever the number was. So in other words, if I do, value 8, and we're saying number, sure enough, very good, isn't it? So the replacement I want to say is number. The capturing group is whatever's contained in this bracket, which is the value 8. So in fact you could probably do this. Yes, that's right. So any number really is what that will expand to. All very nice, but anyway, for the sake of this it's very simple. So if I run that, let's just run it all the way to the end. You can see now that basically where it used to say value 1, it now says number 1. This is like a mapping operation. There is an operator for mapping, but this is just illustrative of how you can use regular expressions to make some pretty sophisticated replacements of values inside an example set. Now there are one or two other places where regular expressions get used. Some operators, for example, when you're selecting the attributes that you want the operator to apply to, will have similar logic to this selection dialog box here. And there are one or two other operators. dpivot springs to mind, but slightly too complicated for today. But anyway, as I say at the beginning, spend a bit of time learning how to use these and get to grips with these basic operations here, and you'll be very happy about that. So finally, I'll just leave this with this dialog box up here, and I'll just fiddle around with this just to show the sorts of things you can do.